Here is some background about the Kurds. The Kurds are one of the indigenous people in the Mesopotamian plains and highlands in what is now southeastern Turkey, northeastern Syria, northern Iraq, northwestern Iran, and southwestern Armenia. Settlers also included Muslim Arabs from the 7th century, Seljuk Turks in the 11th century from the east, the Mongols in the 13th century from the east, medieval Persians, Ottoman Turks from the north, and most recently, the United States in its 2003 invasion of Iraq. The Kurds, luckily, have been able to retreat into the mountains for sanctuary. This protection is what saved the Kurds from destruction and allowed them to survive as a distinct ethnic group. Their traditional nomadic lifestyle in the inhospitable mountain homeland provides a natural means to invade marauding armies that subject indigenous people to rape, murder, and genocide. The Kurds have been conquered by ancient Persians from the east and Alexander the Great from the western ethnic group. They've always sought autonomy and independence. These aspirations have resulted in almost continuous conflict and a history of repression and resiliency in the face of existential threats by the Turks, Arabs, Iranians, and their forebears. It was in the early 1900s when the Kurds began to consider the possibility of having a homeland separate from any nation. After World War I and the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, the Kurds were granted a provision for the Kurdish state by the Allies. However, any possibilities of having a separate nation were set back by the creation of Turkey through the Treaty of Lausanne. The Treaty of Lausanne set the modern boundaries of Turkey and left no room for the Kurdish provision. Any attempts made by the Kurds the following 80 years were brutally squashed.
We, the Kurds, should obtain our own nation because we've been denied basic civil rights. Giving us our own nation state would allow for us to reclaim our rights and experience citizenship like all other ordinary people, since our rights have been denied since the 1960s.
Although the creation of a new nation-state may seem impractical at first and will take time, it is justified because saving millions of lives from years of horrible abuse and basic human right violations outweigh the inconvenience that the creation of a new nation-state would result in. Another reason is that the Kurds faced a genocide attempt by the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, ISIS. Hundreds of thousands of Kurds fled to the mountains in an attempt to save their lives, were killed, died of starvation, or raped and sold to slavery. Just a month later, in September 2014, ISIS captured hundreds of Kurdish villages in northern Syria. Thousands more Kurds were killed and more than 200,000 were forced from their homes to seek safety. Giving the Kurds their own nation-state is a clear solution to this discrimination. Although it might appear that no sovereign nation that cares about its own future prosperity would abandon a good chunk of its territory and resources to an ethnic minority just because that land used to belong to that ethnic minority centuries ago, kind of like how it's unrealistic and silly to expect that the white people of the United States return to Europe and leave only the indigenous people of North America reigning, the reason this argument is not important is because the difference between the United States and Turkey, Iran, or Iraq returning lies in a few points. First, that the colonizers that invaded North America invaded well over 200 years ago, compared to less than 100 years that Turkey, Iran, or Iraq have been in possession of the land that would be returned to the Kurds. That's 200 years of history and a highly influential global superpower wiped out compared to the less than 100 that Turkey or Iraq would give up. Second, and more importantly, it's unreasonable to ask white people of the United States to give the land back because it's an entire country that would displace millions of people. The land the Kurds require to establish their own nation is not the entirety of Turkey. It wouldn't displace a particularly large amount of people either. The Kurds live there already. Additionally, the ability to embrace your own culture without being victims of discrimination proves that we should obtain our own nation state. We, the Kurds, have received harsh treatment at the hands of the Turkish authorities for generations. Kurdish names and costumes were banned, the use of Kurdish language was restricted, and even the existence of Kurdish ethnic identity has been denied. The Kurds deserve ultimate freedom.
Now, Giorgio, let's take a look at the current day status of the Kurds in our thought bubble.
The Kurds today face discrimination from Erdogan, Turkey, and ISIS. The Atlantic brings us into a closer insight, focusing on a small neighborhood in southeastern Turkey. It was nearly midnight on July 23rd when a slew of Turkish police officers raided Kurdish homes and detained a 17-year-old mentally disabled young man.
Such an incident is not a one-time occurrence. The Kurds face these repeated violations of basic human rights as stateless people, and will continue to face them unless something is done.
He doesn't even know how to talk or count, said the parent. He's just a boy who was playing outside on the street at the time of the attack, and they took him to terrorize us. This is all part of Turkey's war against the Kurds.
Some Kurds did participate in uprisings. Beginning in March 2011, Kurdish activists were arrested due to their participation in the opposition local coordination committees. Leading Kurdish activist Mashal Tamu was killed on October 7th, when armed men forced him out of a house during a meeting with activists and shot him dead. His funeral, which turned into the biggest demonstration in the Kurdish areas since the uprising began, was attended by 50,000 people.
The Kurds today face abuses of their human rights because of their position as stateless people in the country of Turkey. They are discriminated against and unable to celebrate their own culture, which is why we advocate that they are entitled to their own nation-state. Despite some potential difficulties, such as the process of carving out land to provide to the Kurds, the benefits of giving the Kurds a homeland significantly outweigh the negatives.